great to be here and to meet you all. I'm Julie Lowndes, and Eli Holmes is co-presenting and will give an introduction in the second half. So we were talking about Openscapes and the teaching practices that we have found really helpful. And this illustration just kind of shows a visual of the work that we do. We think about open science as this rich landscape full of data, people, tooling, and existing pathways forward. And so what we see ourselves doing is helping folks find their trailhead and sort of move from being this kind of sad, lonely, stuck individual science in the bottom left and towards finding their team and then navigating these existing paths together and helping others as they go. So this Openscapes is really maybe a little different than just a workshop style training. Well, it is different. It's a team-based approach for upskilling researchers, really focused on culture change and shared practices. And it has sustainability and scalability designed in it through community building. And we'll show you what that means. And so we're focused on reusing existing open source tooling and materials as much as we can, and only developing new curriculum to connect things and create entryways and fill gaps. So we're big on reuse and teaching. So I'm a marine ecologist and I founded Openscapes. I'm Julia Stewart Lowndes, and I'm based at UC Santa Barbara and have worked a lot with Mozilla, and then now as a Better Scientific Software Fellow with the U.S. National Science Foundation. And I founded Openscapes to really help teams transition to inclusive open data science workflows. And so this illustration on the right really shows that it's focused on teams and the questions teams are tackling in this outer ring. And we help them better do so by strengthening the shared practices in this inner green ring. And that includes robust analyses, streamlined collaboration, expanded communication, and also kindness and inclusion. And those practices are underpinned by the tooling that exists. So open data science tools like version control, contributing platforms, publication distributing, and open data. And really the motivation for Openscapes was from my own experience as a researcher. My team with the Ocean Health Index found out the hard way that our default approaches to data analysis were not reproducible even to ourselves. We were going through the forwarded emails with version 13-2 and found that that's just not, we couldn't continue that way. So I really learned to teach from open science communities. My entryway was through the R programming language, and that's where I learned from peers, and they role modeled across disciplines and career stages how to create welcoming ways to teach. So this is our Openscapes flywheel, which describes not only how we deliver our main programming, which is this Champions program here in the bottom right, but how that fits into our bigger picture of how we develop and grow as a program and engage others. So really, when we deliver this Champions program, and we'll talk more about this, following that, there's really this sense-making period where research teams are continuing to incorporate these practices into their existing work and transform their workflows. And then we as a program are iterating based on what we learned through teaching. And then from there, we're all working to inspire others in the broader community and make this work and open science and things like reproducibility and whatnot more visible to the broader audiences. We're also developing ourselves as mentors and others as mentors so that we can all help teach others and promote this within our own groups. We then invest in iterating and refining any of the curriculum and resources that we share, and then focus on attracting more teams to participate in this program. So it's really, there's a lot of communication, community engagement, and investment in our mentors as well as delivering the program. So the whole approach we have is really researcher centered and focused on teams. So really helping folks feel safe working openly with themselves and with their teams, and then easing into more through having a cohort approach with other teams and then a bigger open community. So we really found in the last couple of years that what we really do is create space for people to talk and have conversations and explore. And then we also create place for them to start experimenting and co-creating. So this looks like having cohort calls, all remote. This is a remote program, so all via Zoom or equivalent, but also helping role model other types of meeting styles that they can have to upskill and learn with their teams. So things like that are hands-on, we call them seaside chats, like learning experiences, co-working experiences, and then also have these toolings like GitHub and Google Drive and Jupyter Hubs and places where they can actually work. So through this, we're really cultivating these real connections with folks so that these practices help stick and create habits. So it's different from a workshop where folks might go home and continue business as usual. We're really trying to help make this part of the fabric of the way folks work. And a big part of this is having this open culture where we're learning and iterating as we go and are honest about that. It can be messy and imperfect, particularly as we are getting comfortable and learning around diversity, equity, and inclusion practices that we bring into the program. And I should say this link here with the openscapes.org/approach, we also have a whole guide we're developing about how we teach and do things as we onboard other folks. So hope that other people can reuse this whole approach as well. Okay, so if we think about the Champions program, which is our main flagship program of how we engage with researchers, this is a program where we meet 5 times over 2 months with 7 or 8 research teams. So this is up to 40 people at a time. And these folks commit to 5 sessions together over 10 weeks, where we all meet together as a cohort and go through these cohort call topics. So it's about mindset. It's about seeing examples of better science in less time. We have a GitHub clinic from the browser where we focus on the collaborative and project management and publishing aspects of GitHub. We focus on team culture and data strategies for future us. So thinking about metadata and sharing data, and then we think about open communities and where folks can go to learn and expect that there's existing things for them to use rather than reinventing on their own, writing code in ways that other people could reuse. And then at the end, they share their progress, their work in progress so far. So this is an example of how, once we have a cohort that we're preparing for, how we help identify teams that will nominate themselves to participate. So what the Champions program looks like is we're really helping try to normalize talking about their data workflows and then helping them find the common about what they need and what exists already so they can reuse. So one of the things we do is we have this pathways document or pathways spreadsheet where we fill out these first 2 columns saying, here are some ways to think about the way you work. Can you now fill in how you're working now and talk about this with your team? Think about, do you have data preparation separate from data analysis? How do you think about collaborating with files? What types of files? So really helping folks have this space and these prompts to think about how they're working. And it's really neat to see kind of their next steps as they explore tooling that exists through the Champions cohort calls, and then also as they explore what other peers in their network are doing. And it's neat to see kind of what people are able to do. So they're able to say, we're no longer emailing code. When we started, we were pretty head down, and now this feels really aspirational. These are a few other examples of what folks present in that last cohort call when they're talking about their pathway. So this is an example from one of the NOAA groups, some of Eli's colleagues up in Alaska who shared that they're collecting data at sea, and ultimately they'll get to figures and indicators and reports, And it used to be this kind of like loopy, visually looped process where they had all these different ways of doing things in the past, and now they have a more streamlined progress towards being more deliberate and having more limited tooling and making sure everybody is on the same page. And it's neat to see this kind of amplifying experiences through Twitter. So those details were really about this champions program here that, like I was saying, folks are sense making and then starting to inspire through Twitter. And something that we've been just so excited about as well is we've been able to develop this whole flywheel with NASA with their Earth data program, because there we've been able to actually, for the past year, work with a bunch of mentors from across NASA data centers. These are folks that are user services experts, but had been pretty siloed. And so we've helped, first of all, make a mentor community across these data centers and develop this community that are developing as teachers. They're co-creating resources as needed. And then they are starting to empower more and more teams, both through the Champions program, but also through other modalities. So through hackathons, through asynchronously through Slack and beyond. So it's really exciting, and it also builds into what we're hoping to do more with NOAA. So I will pass this over to Eli now.
Hi, I'm Eli Holmes. First name's Elizabeth, so you'll see that also listed on my email. I'm a research scientist at Northwest Fisheries Science Center, which is part of NOAA Fisheries. I'm in Seattle, Washington. My background is I've been really involved in developing, supporting open science at my agency for forever. And then more recently, I've been really involved in teaching across the agency. So teaching R and GitHub across the agency and developing content for that. I also lead a R user group that's across the agency, and then involved in some other interagency, so across the U.S. federal agencies' efforts to support our users. And then I've been the co-lead for the NOAA Fisheries Openscapes. NMFS is our acronym for NOAA Fisheries. It means National Marine Fisheries Service. So a little bit about NOAA Fisheries. We are divided into a science wing and a policy wing. The science wing is developing the science that supports the policy decisions that are worked on by the policy wing. So what I'm going to be talking about today are efforts to modernize the sort of data the modeling and data workflows of our scientific staff across the agency. And for us, R is primarily the language that we are coding in. That's not the only language, but that's really important. And that's what I'm going to focus on today. But just to be clear, like what I'm talking about is not like R specific exactly. So our science centers, we have 6 of them. They're around the country, and they're pretty separated. They are separated, very separated. We don't really have communication channels, like official communication channels across the center, so they are kind of isolated or siloed, is the term we use. In terms of staff, NOAA Fisheries is about a little bit over 4,000 staff, but that's also that Science Center and Policy Center. My center is about 350 staff, and that's mainly scientific staff. the other science centers. Some of them are bigger, others are smaller, but that's kind of roughly the size we're talking about. Next slide. What I'm going to be talking about today is about thinking about how the sort of modernizing tools, these, switching to this open science workflows and getting teams all working together and helping each other and spreading, and also like the upskilling of our GitHub, our Markdown. These are tools that are really important for us for our reproducible workflows, helping to spread those technologies and that information across our agency. And my thinking on this and help strategizing of how we need to move forward was really influenced by a talk that I listened to at GitHub Universe in October 2021, and I put the link to that here. This is from Royal Bank of Canada, and it's talking about their what they call inner source. So obviously this is a bank. Open source is maybe not going to land too well on when they're trying to sell this idea within the bank. So they call it instead inner source. So this is collaboration within the software community within their bank, but it's not open. It's closed to the bank. But anyhow, so I really recommend watching that. Great talk, and you'll see echoes of that talk in what I'm about to present. Next slide. So in thinking about how to get these ideas or help these ideas spread throughout our agency, starting with the thinking about this using the framework of diffusion of innovation and what that has to teach us about how ideas spread throughout an organization. So when the idea starts out, you have the innovator class, and in our case, these innovator class looked like the R gurus, and these are those people. They're highly skilled. They you could always, if you ask people in your science center, hey, who's the real R person, they would point to this person who, it's our guru, and they're really, really skilled, and they're the kind of person they really kind of like challenges. They're not hindered by the fact that maybe the documentation is not that great or it's hard to use. Connecting things is hard. They're not deterred by that kind of thing. So they're really highly skilled, but actually they're not all that great at developing technology products that are accessible to others. I mean, they're not hindered by barriers in any way, and so they're not all that great at the kind of the next step. Next slide. The next group, so I should say that these groups are personality types. They're not people who are necessarily already using your technology. So the next group, as this idea spreads throughout a community, is the people who are called early adopters. And these people have a lot of similarities with the innovators, but they're also really different. So they embrace new technology. They don't need a whole lot of guidance. You show them the how-to manual, they can go with it. And they see the potential of the idea. They're like, oh, wow, if we adopted that idea, it would make things so much better. So they're also called visionaries. They see what could be. But an interesting aspect of these people is they really enjoy making technology usable. So you'll identify these people of those people who just naturally, they'll create, they create teaching materials. They're not ordered to do it. They just do it. They create a package to make it easy for somebody else to use this thing. They're just driven inside to teach other people. And next slide. And it's really important when trying to spread something throughout an agency that you really reach this class of people. And one of the reasons is that it's been found that once you can really get really good reaching of this idea in an organization, a community, around 15%, that's kind of the tipping point when things really spread. So next slide. Problem with this is that, as I said, that these are personality types, and this personality type is rare, right? This isn't a majority personality type. These people, we've got, our, silos. These are science centers, and with science centers we have divisions, and within divisions we have teams, and each of these have their own versions of kind of siloing. And these early adopters we want to reach are isolated, right? They're often their own little team, and they don't really have a way to communicate with other early adopters who they need to be communicating with and collaborating with. So it's just not really a way. I mean, they could email, but think about it. Like, everybody's doing their work, right? Like, you need to head down and do your work. So obviously they could email them, but people are really focused on their work, so they're off doing that. Okay, so that's our problem. We don't really have a way to get all these early adopters collaborating together. Next slide. So I began thinking about, okay, so how do we move forward? And so I began thinking about how reproducible workflow has, and again, for us, this is like our Markdown GitHub, but it doesn't need to be exactly those tools. But for us, how have these tools been spreading throughout our agency, and kind of where are we in this graph? Because recognizing where we are in this graph tells us where we need to focus our energy. So 2018 to 2019 is when we first, I would say, really had the emergence of an early adopter group that was working cross-agency. So this is now moving out of individual science centers and getting communication and collaboration among early adopters in different science centers. And that was a group called the Fisheries Integrated Toolbox. NOAA supported a whole bunch of these groups. And this Fisheries Integrated Toolbox was the group that was focused on stock assessment. So that's figuring out how many fish are out there. And they really are the ones who got really organized and successful. And they started doing these meetings. And importantly, they started doing these open trainings and email lists. So open trainings meant anyone across the agency could join the trainings. And so people who are interested in R, but not interested in stock assessment, started going to their trainings. So this is, like I said, there's this communication problem. Each science center has its own communication. There wasn't really ways to communicate across centers. And so this Fisheries Integrated Toolbox and the email list and the trainings they're offering was really important. I put a note in there. They have now become Fisheries Integrated Modeling Group, much more organized now. But back in 2019, they were just getting started. Okay, next slide. And then a next thing that was happening sort of 2019, 2020 is the early adopter group is getting bigger. So starting to spread. This first process as an idea spreading in the early adopters, it's painfully slow. And this manifested as a bunch of workshops that were being offered. As I said, these early adopters are just motivated to teach other people. And so this was happening across the science centers, different groups. I run and have for 3 years an 8-week open workshops on Fridays, and that's offered across the agency. But I wasn't the only one. There was a big fisheries economics one. Some of the other science center scientists were running their own workshops. We had something called PSA, cross agency. So we had these different efforts going on. Next slide. But the problem was really we were getting people who already know R, and also, yes, we're getting communication across the centers, but there were centers and teams that were totally left out. So as I said, this is kind of the people who are kind of already into this, were really engaging, but we weren't moving into kind of the mainstream. Next slide. Yeah, so we had to do better. Okay, next slide. And so this is where the Openscapes really comes in, and that is now bringing in whole teams that involve people who are not doing this already, and teams that are really focused not on learning R, but they're focused on, hey, we got this report to do. And now how do we figure out and work together to incorporate this into our workflows? So this is really totally different. It's not about the tools. It's about we got this big thing, and we need to talk together to move forward. And it was really important for us to work with Openscapes because they provided the framework and the organization, and I don't know, it's just like we really needed an outside organization to help organize that for us and provide that framework, and then get us connected with other similar groups across other agencies. So like NASA, Julie mentioned, but there are other agencies, state agencies that they're working with. And it's been really helpful for us to work with them because they have similar issues. Okay, it's 8:30, a couple minutes here. Okay, next slide. So I just want to give you very quickly, so after Openscapes totally changed our kind of connectivity and collaboration, and now we are moving into the stage of developing the mentors group who will then help continue spreading this throughout our agency. So next slide. So next stage is now moving into the early majority, and this group is really different. So these are the people who are not motivated by new technology. They are motivated by the job to be done. And this is the majority of people in our agency. We have a job to be done, and they want to use the tools that are going to enable them to get that job done better. And we've identified that changing to a reproducible workflow is really important to deal with a lot of problems that we're having in our sort of data science. It's good. All our entire workflow has some big problems that we recognize and we haven't been able to deal with in terms of like reusability and archiving data and transparency and being efficient. So we're trying to deal with those issues. Okay, next slide. And I just want to give you a quick example, a couple examples of like really important user stories for us. So user stories are things that, I emphasize job to be done. These are the jobs to be done that are the really big ones. Okay, next slide. You can go kind of quickly through this. I'll be jumping quickly, Julie. So one is big reports. Next slide. And the issue we have is there's a lot of manual work. This was an example Julie gave, and we need to go to much more automated, markdown, documented, reproducible workflows. All the steps of every changes are documented. Here's an example of a big report that's being done this way. This was one of our participants. Next slide. Another big issue we have is automating quality control of our data streams and providing access to that. Next slide. Here's an example of, again, a participant. This is actually the same participant as the report one, of creating a workflow that is taking data from ships, doing quality control, and then making that visible both to the public and to all the team members who need to see that data and quickly fix any problems. Next slide. And this is also interesting. We've identified that project management is something that our teams really need. And next slide. So we've been spending a lot more time teaching project management using GitHub. And GitHub's really helpful because they're already coding on GitHub, and now the GitHub project management tools are really helping them plan their work and collaborate across their team. So the last couple slides here. So this is where we're heading. Like we have this sort of data life cycle, it's data and analysis, and we would like this to be a full process. So after we get done analyzing, creating the report, we preserve that, preserve the data, we share the data, and then we reuse it. And that makes us more efficient. And if we're brutally honest, and Openscapes has helped us be brutally honest, that preserve, share, and reuse is, next slide, is not happening. So each of these plan, collect, and process and analyze, they work in these silos. They're not really communicating across each other effectively. And that creates all kinds of problems. And then the rest of the life cycle just gets kind of is an afterthought.